With this lesson, we start a new clause, which is the ninth clause, which is the performance evaluation. Performance evaluation is divided into three sub-clauses. The first one, 9.1, is monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation. So, in a general talk, this is the first part of the first sub-clause, or this is the first sub-clause. So, generally, this expects the organization to identify what they need to monitor, measure, analyze, and evaluate, and check if the expected results are being achieved. Basically, evaluate to ensure that what they're delivering is how it should be. This could be done by taking into consideration what needs to be monitored and measured, and also the methods for monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation as applicable to ensure valid results. Basically, how will the organization does the monitoring and measurement, analysis, and all that effectively. And also, the organization needs to consider the timing of the monitoring and measuring. So when the monitoring and measuring shall be performed, and when the results from the monitoring and measurement shall be analyzed and evaluated. Maybe at the end of a job, maybe midway through, maybe at the beginning of the recruitment process. Also, the organization needs to retain appropriate documented information. So it needs to record data on performance, on controls, and conformance with objectives and targets. And also, the organization needs to evaluate the quality, performance, and the effectiveness of the quality management system. So what the organization does with the results to check if the business is working as it should be. And it needs to establish a management review and reporting. So all of that works to make an effective measurement, to make an effective monitoring, and an effective analyzing and evaluation of performance. Now, what if the organization have just started and have no evidence yet? Well, this is accepted, but the organization should have a clear understanding what these are in the future. Now, let's take the example of maybe an organization that wants to measure their engineers' performance. It can does that in a number of ways, like the completion of commissioning paperwork, like test results, and like technical audits. Now, as for auditing this requirement, the auditor of course needs to review the documented information, like the results of monitoring and measurement, and analysis and evaluation. So the auditor needs to take a look at the results of all of that. Also, the auditor needs to see what the organization considers needed to monitor and measure, and also what methods are used. When we say methods could be as KPI or key performance indicators, like conformity of the products and services, like accomplishment of quality objectives, customer satisfaction, warranty claims, complaints, etc. The second subclause of measuring, analyzing, and evaluation is customer satisfaction. The organization is required to monitor customers' perceptions of the degree to which their needs and expectations have been fulfilled. So, there continues to be a need to obtain feedback from customers on whether they feel the product or service they have purchased was as they expected. Now, just collecting data on customer perceptions, and of course when we say customer perceptions, it's what the customer thinks of the product or service. So just collecting data is not sufficient. The organization needs to seek and record evidence that it has analyzed and evaluated customer data by seeing whether there are any trends regarding their product and service, and whether the customer needs and expectations are changing. To To effectively do that, the organization needs to determine appropriate methods for measuring and monitoring customer satisfaction by using customer satisfaction surveys, maybe by face-to-face evaluations. If we're talking about a hotel, we could ask, how was your stay? Maybe by telephone calls or visits, which are of course made periodically, not persistently, or after delivery of products and services. It could be by internal inquiries among the organization's personnel who are in contact, who are in touch with customers. So we're talking about the personnel who know the clients or the customers. We're talking maybe by monitoring accounts receivable and warranty claims, etc., or the customer complaints analysis. So this is how to determine, this is how to make perfect or effective measuring and monitoring customer satisfaction. As for auditing this requirement, the auditor needs to see what is the desired output of the process, what information is actually available on customer perception, and how this information is used by management to drive improvement to the product, processes, and the quality management system as a whole. And also, how is the data collected to feed the process, how all that data on customer perception is collected, and how reliable is that data, how reliable is that information, by verifying the criteria that the organization uses for any sampling of its customer. And after collecting that data, it needs to be analyzed. So the auditor needs to evaluate how that data and how that information is analyzed. Basically, the organization needs to analyze and evaluate appropriate data and information arising from monitoring and measuring. So this is pretty straightforward. Now, data and information can be gathered from, as we've seen before, from quality records, from monitoring and measuring results, from process performance results, from internal audit findings, from customer surveys and feedback, from second or third party audit results, from competitor and benchmarking information. So the sources of the data and information are pretty numbered. Now, once the data and information are gathered, they are used to evaluate the conformity of products and services, basically to ensure that data is used to check what they're selling is as it should be, and also to evaluate the degree of customer satisfaction, how happy are customers, and the performance and effectiveness of the quality management system, meaning how well did the organization perform. And also the results of analysis are used to evaluate if the planning has been implemented effectively. Did it go according to plan, or were there maybe hiccups along the way? And also to evaluate the effectiveness of actions taken to address risks and opportunities. Maybe the safety measures put in place, did they work? And also the results are used to evaluate the performance of external providers. Maybe did subcontractors perform as they expected? And also to evaluate the need for improvements to the quality management system. What do they need to change now to make the quality management system better? For example, the analysis and review of the monthly preventative maintenance performance, basically to ensure that the organization is meeting their obligations. Now, as for auditing this requirement, the auditor needs to see how was the data and the information collected, and we've already seen this in the previous video. So how was the data and information gathered and collected, and whether that information is used in management review and any other processes. The second subclause of performance evaluation is internal audits. The point or the aim of internal audit is to give the organization a feedback loop on its processes and find out where the organization is not compliant with processes that they wrote, to be able to highlight areas for improvement. So really, you really want some non-conformance or feedback out of these internal audits, otherwise they're pointless. Now, this subclause is in turn divided into other two subclauses, which we're going to talk about in the same lesson here. So the first one is, of course, requires the organization to perform internal audits of its quality management system at planned intervals, basically to provide information that the quality management system conforms to the organization requirements. In other words, are you doing what you said you would in your quality management system? And are you, of course, as an organization, following your own procedures? And also to provide information that the quality management system conforms to the standard, or to ISO 9001 2015 standards requirements for each of the clauses that are relevant to the organization. And also to ensure or to provide information that the quality management system is effectively implemented and maintained. In other words, is it a living system that forms a real part of your organization's culture and the day-to-day operation? Or maybe is it just something that sits on the shelf and only dragged 1 week before an external audit? Now, what we just saw is the role that internal audit plays at an organization. And it says here internal audits are performed at planned intervals, and we're gonna get back to that later. Now, let's dive a little bit more in with the second part of this subclause. So the second part, this is where real help kicks in, as it tells you exactly as an organization how to perform internal audit. The first part is about planning of the audit program, and the organization must consider a number of things about the program, like, for example, the frequency of the audit and how you will audit, and the responsibilities around the auditing, and the planning requirements and reporting. Now, frequency is up to the organization. It depends on the complexity, the size of the organization, and the criticality of each process, and of course on the results of previous audits. Now, a lot of people think that the organization must audit the entire quality management system every year, but that's not the case, because the standard takes the risk-based approach to everything. So sometimes once in 2 years is enough for some processes, and sometimes it's a monthly basis. It's on a monthly basis or a regular basis. It's totally up to the of course the organization. So the timing here, or the frequency here, is flexible. So how you audit is also up to the organization. The organization just needs to follow good audit practices. Now, as for the second part, it says the second step is defining the audit criteria. We're talking policies, processes, performance criteria like objectives, regulatory and statutory requirements, and also information regarding the context and the risks and opportunities, and also the scope of each audit. For example, auditing the supply chain is a huge task. So you could audit just a part or a process linked to it, like the order process or the stores control process. And then we've got the selection of auditors and conducting audits to ensure objectively and the impartiality of the audit process. Basically, we want auditors to work well with people. Now, it's not required that internal auditors are formally qualified, but it would be great if they are qualified. And one more thing, they should not be involved in the activity being examined. And then we've got ensuring that the results of the audits are reported to relevant management, so that the output should be discussed with the management of the audited department. And then we've got taking appropriate correction and corrective actions without undue delay. We're talking if the audit is any good, there will be things that could be improved, whether it's non-conformance or just improvement notice. And then we've got, of course, the organization needs to retain documented information as evidence of the implementation of the audit program and the audit results. We're talking maybe the calendars, referencing any non-conformance or improvement notices. These are, of course, the steps that the organization must take in order to effectively perform an internal audit. Now, as for auditing this requirement, the auditor needs to evaluate the competence of the people or the competencies that are needed for the audit and applied to the audit. The auditor also needs to evaluate the objectivity and impartiality of the internal audit process. Also, the auditor needs to ensure that risk-based thinking is performed by the organization in planning internal audits. In other words, of course, identifying the risks and opportunities that comes in that process. Of course, the auditor needs to evaluate the degree of the involvement of the management in the internal audit process. The auditor also needs to see whether the organization is working by ISO 19011 2018, which provides guidelines for auditing management system. Though it's not a requirement, but the auditor needs to see if the organization is working by that. But as I said, it's not a requirement. The auditor also needs to see how the organization evaluates the effectiveness of its quality management system through the results of the internal audit and how it identifies opportunities for improvement. The third subclause of performance evaluation is management review. Management review is in turn divided into other three subclauses. The first one is, of course, general. Generally, the top management is required to review the organization's quality management system at planned intervals to ensure its continuing suitability, adequacy, effectiveness, and alignment with the strategic direction of the organization. So the management review must address the possible need for changes to policy, objectives, targets, and other elements of the quality management system. So these reviews are placed in meetings, and these meetings will enable the top management to respond to issues and to recommend improvements. Now, who should attend these review meetings? Well, it's important that a member of the top management chairs the management review meetings. And we've got functional management, we've got line management. Of course, let me go back. Functional management are the persons who have authority over maybe a department. We've got line management who are responsible for the production and responsible and have authority over the persons in the production section. We've got process owners, we've got process champions, we've got action owners within the scope of the quality management system who are the persons who perform the task. And we've got internal auditors. These are the persons who should attend the management review meetings. Now, how often should these management review meetings occur? Well, of course, that depends on the level of risks and complexity of the organization. We've got for a critical management review agenda items like process performance, like customer feedback and monitoring and measuring results. These should be reviewed monthly. And for a less critical agenda items like reviewing the quality policy and objectives should be undertaken less frequency. These should be taken less frequency, perhaps every quarter. Now, annual management reviews are insufficient in frequency to be able to react to any issues effectively. I'm saying this because a lot of organizations conduct management reviews annually, but that's insufficient. This is the second subclass of management review, and it talks about the management review inputs. This subclass gives us a list of things that should be taken into consideration in terms of inputs to the review. So I'm just going to list them out because I don't really have any other option. So the first one is the status of actions from previous management reviews. So the first input to take into consideration is the status of the actions that were taken in the previous management reviews. The second one is any changes, whether it's internal or external, that would have an impact on the quality management system. For example, the restructuring or changing focus to an entirely new industry. And then we've got the review information on the performance and the effectiveness of the quality management system. This could happen on the basis of a few key parameters or the key indicators. We're talking maybe the customer satisfaction, the progress on quality objectives, the internal quality, any non-conformances or corrective actions or complaints, any issues around monitoring and measurements results, and the audit results, and how external providers are performing and any actions required there. Other inputs that the management review should focus on are resources. So how adequate are resources, and how effective any actions that were taken as a result of risks and opportunities identified been. So how effective those actions have been. And another input that the management review should focus on is the opportunities within the organization. So the opportunities for improvement that the organization should identify. Now let's talk about the management review outputs. Here, the standard is looking for the organization to record what decisions or actions have come out of the discussions within the review. So what actions are made or what decisions are made after this management review. Now, outputs can include opportunities for improvement, any actions for improvement or further decisions regarding opportunities for improvement, and any need for changes to the quality management system, and any need for resources. Now, the organization is required to retain documented information to provide evidence that the management review has been done and the results of it. The documented information like minutes or any data presented like charts, like tables or reports. Now, as for auditing this requirement, the auditor of course will review those documented information I just listed out, and the auditor should conduct interviews with the top management to ensure that management review meetings are covering inputs and outputs, and to ensure that management review meetings are actually happening. And the auditor will ensure that actions and decisions are aimed at the improvement of the quality management system.